I want to start just by asking, what quantifies near-death experience?
Sure. Now, different researchers have different concepts, but the research definition that I've always used is exactly what the name implies. You're near death. In other words, you're so physically compromised, you're unconscious, or you may be clinically dead with absent heartbeat.
Okay.
Now, at that time, it should be impossible to have any lucid conscious remembrance, and yet people do have that remembrance at that time, and that's the experience part of a near-death experience. What I have observed, and other near-death experience researchers see, is that very consistent pattern of what happens when you have a near-death experience. Well, of course, there's that life-threatening event. They're unconscious or clinically dead, no heartbeat. But at that time, a very common first element, it's what's called an out-of-body experience.
Okay.
Consciousness separates from the physical body and goes above the body. Now, from that vantage point, they can see ongoing earthly events, often including people frantically trying to bring them back to life. They may then go into or through a tunnel, variably described. Often at the end of the tunnel, there's a beautiful, unearthly, they emphasize, light. In that, after passing through the tunnel, then at that time, they may be in an unearthly, what some call a heavenly realm, aptly described. It's very different from what we've known everywhere on our earthly life. It's literally a non-physical realm. Movement is non-physical. Communication is essentially always telepathic. Time is almost invariably described as either radically different from earthly time or not existing at all. In this realm, this unearthly, beautiful, heavenly realm, there can be encounters with deceased loved ones. There can be a review of a part or all of their prior life, called a life review. At this point, they can be colors, like in plants and landscape, that are so beautiful that there are no earthly words that they have to describe them. There can be buildings. Around this time, there's often a decision that they make as they interact with other beings about whether to stay in this beautiful, unearthly realm or return to their earthly life and that body struggling to survive. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. We had one relatively recent near-death experience. Lady was riding a horse and was out, basically breaking in the horse, and the horse threw her off, and she hit her head, very severe head injury, immediately unconscious. She had that out-of-body experience, consciousness above her body, saw her body lying on the ground, saw the horse heading back to home, but then her consciousness went to where she had started prior to her journey, the barn, and she was able to hear other people talking, aware of what they were saying, doing. They didn't know that she was fighting for her life over a mile away because they weren't aware of that. They only were aware of that when the horse arrived without her. And again, she was able to see and bring back all that information, verified down to the finest details of what she was seeing. And a mile away, obviously, there's no way you're going to see, hear, or perceive in any way with your normal sensory function.
So people leaving their physical realm, right? You leave, and I guess, do they feel okay being away from themselves? Do they feel like, jeepers, I got to get back into myself, like when you lost your phone or something, Or does it feel like, that's what I would be like, gosh, because if I'm just milling around, it's almost like you're just naked, like you're as naked as you could be. You're naked down to your soul.
That's a good assumption, and I kind of wondered about that too early in my research. But amazingly, even though these people are unconscious or clinically dead and may have had, severe trauma or illness problems that led to that episode of unconsciousness, when that consciousness separates from their physical body, they essentially never describe any pain. It's unusual for them to feel fear about consciousness apart from their body. Far more commonly described is a sense of calm, a sense of peace, a sense, amazingly, that this is actually their real conscious self, that being non-physical and apart from their body down below.
So that's a common thing that people say, oh, that felt a lot more real than the existence I'd been having in my body?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we have a survey question, and we ask people, about what they said, what they ultimately decided about the reality of their experience. And in our survey of 834 people that had a near-death experience where we asked that question, 93.8% said their experience was definitely real. And over as part of that, they were saying it was more real than anything they'd known in their earthly life. They typically have acceleration of consciousness. Amazingly, the substantial majority, even though they're physically unconscious or clinically dead, are actually thinking, processing at a speed they simply couldn't have done in their earthly life.
Okay, and why is it at that time that you shouldn't be able to have any lucid brain activity? Why is that?
Sure. Let's talk about what happens to the brain after a cardiac arrest, which means the heart stops beating.
Okay.
The moment the heart stops beating, Theo, obviously, blood immediately stops flowing to the brain. 10 to 20 seconds after that event, the EEG, which is electroencephalogram, a measure of brain electrical activity, goes absolutely flat. There's no measurable cortical brain activity.
20 seconds after the heart stops.
After the heart stop and after blood stops going to the brain. It should be impossible to have any remembrance at that time, let alone the highly lucid and organized near-death experience. Everything I knew as a physician told me this is not possible. You can't have highly lucid, conscious experiences when you're unconscious or clinically dead. And yet here, the very first few dozens of people sharing with me very clearly, and what was very impressive is the remarkable consistency of the elements they were describing. What happened during the experience, the elements, or if you will, characteristics. Not only were they very consistently seen across many, many near-death experiences, but they typically occurred in a very consistent and logical order. This is nothing like dreams or hallucinations or any other type of pathologically altered consciousness. I realized very, very quickly, and as I was to learn even more and more got more and more experiences shared with me, near-death experiences are, in a word, real.
Okay, so those are the most common characteristics of the near-death experiences.
Sure.
And what would be your strongest evidence that this actually happens? Because anybody can kind of go on a website, any naysayer would be like, anybody can go on a website and fill it out, right? Sure, there's been a ton of people that have done it, but what's the most common evidence that you believe that this has happened, that you believe?
Oh, absolutely. Theo, we talked earlier about that out-of-body experience where consciousness goes above the body, above the unconscious or comatose physical body below. What I and other researchers have investigated is how accurate are those observations in that out-of-body state. And amazingly, in my study, over 98% of what people are seeing and hearing with their physical body unconscious down below is accurate down to the finest detail.
So you started to kind of quantify or collect the experiences people were having at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've been researching and gathering near-death experiences for over 25 years.
Okay.
I was so fascinated when I first heard about near-death experiences that I really wanted to study them, but with the best methodology possible.
Okay.
And that being people that actually had near-death experiences sharing their first-person experience.
Right.
So over 25 years ago, I established the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation, a research website which encouraged people to share a narrative of their experience, but also had a scientifically designed huge number of questions actually as a survey, so that not only were we getting large numbers of near-death experiences, but we were learning about them from all those survey questions at a depth that heretofore had been impossible.
Okay, so you create a website where people would go that had near-death experiences, and they would start to just list out the information, right? Like, what were kind of some of the questions that you would ask to somebody?
Sure. Well, first, of course, we have them give the narrative of their experience. We don't want any leading questions prior to that time. Right off the bat, I realized there was overwhelming consistency even in the first few dozen near-death experiences I saw.
Yeah, what were some of the things that led you to believe that they were real?
Oh, absolutely. The overwhelming consistency. Now, while no two near-death experiences are the same, if you study a lot of them, and Theo, I've studied over 4,000.
Oh, wow.
So with that huge data set,
really loitering around there.
It's kept me busy. It's my second full-time job.
Yeah, dude, wow. St. Peter over here milling around.
It's tough to be a full-time doctor, which I'm trying to do while doing that as my other full-time job. But, I mean, just imagine that. Here you are unconscious or clinically dead, and yet about a fifth of people have a life review, or they may see part or even all of their prior life. Here they are, unconscious just for often minutes, certainly, less than 30 minutes almost always. And yet, at that time, they're reliving, viewing all that went on in their prior life. An amazing demonstration of just how rapid consciousness can be during a near-death experience.
But how do you know something is not just a dream? How do you, I'm trying to think of another word for a dream, but I don't know another word for it.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. I mean, in all of our lives, we typically have dreams. That's very common. Near-death experiences are nothing like dreams. Theo, at the risk of embarrassment, I'm going to share with you how I found out about that. At the very dawn of putting a survey up on the website, I asked the question, was your experience dreamlike in any way? And I was embarrassed at the responses. No way, no chance, absolutely not. Emphatic over and over again for people having near-death experiences, emphasizing this had nothing to do with dreams. So I quickly let go of that line of questioning. So again, when you hear about a near-death experience, it seems so unearthly. People normally would think, gosh, isn't that like a dream that I'm familiar with?
Yeah.
Nothing, absolutely nothing like a dream. It's far more lucid and conscious.
Were there other choices that came up?
Yeah, I'll tell you the most poignant choice that we encountered in near-death experiences, and that is a choice to stay in that unearthly, beautiful realm, in the environment they're in, often their spirits, or the choice to return to their earthly life and struggle to overcome that life-threatening event that they caused the near-death experience.
I see.
And this is where it gets really interesting, Theo. At that moment of decision, even though people having the near-death experience, everything that they knew up to that time, friends, family, loved ones, decades of their life often, is their earthly life. And yet, what they're experiencing in this unearthly realm, overwhelming sense of peace and love, those are about the two most common words used. And they often describe that they feel this unearthly, beautiful realm is their real home, their true home. But the great majority of people that are in that unearthly, heavenly realm that make a decision, or asked to make a decision, want to stay there. They want to leave their earthly life and not come back. And believe me, that is a difficult decision. They will often argue with the beings there.
Oh,
that
yeah.
can
It's
be,
like when you go to Destin for the first time. You've been in Destin?
Oh, yeah. So that's really interesting.
I never want to
But
live there.
That's just how compelling and beautiful and what the sense is like in this unearthly, beautiful realm that they're in of near-death experience.
Is it mostly is it more women that fill them out than men? Because women, I think, low-key want to die all the time, I feel like.
Well,
or because they love Dateline, you know what I'm saying? They're always like, they're always leaving a window open.
That's a great question. It's probably pretty close to 50-50, but I'll tell you why. I think, Theo, guys like us are just a little more inclined than women to drive the car fast, to go do risky things, swim in places we shouldn't swim. We've all been, I mean, it's a guy thing. So we may be a little more predisposed to have fun in some risky way. Women, I think, are a little less inclined to do that. So I think that may help explain why it's about 50-50.
Have you ever had a near-death experience?
No, I haven't, thank goodness. So
now, is there a part of you that, because at some point you gotta, put your muffins where the oven is. You know what I'm saying, bro?
Like that.
And you know what I'm saying? At some point,
okay,
people were gonna, you know what I'm saying? If you want to write the third book, you gotta have to go over there.
But let me tell you how it works in the real world here, Theo. People that have had a near-death experience in general, typically are not near-death experience researchers. And I think the reason for that is they know about near-death experience. It is grippingly real. They understand it. They understand its implications in their life. And so as a result of that, they're not asking questions like me and so many other people that do research in this area that want to know, is it real? What happens? So again, but a near-death experience cures any near-death experience disbelief. That's for sure.
Does part of you ever wish, and it's not, nobody wants to, because near-death experience, death is in the middle of it. That's the tricky part. Of the rest of it you can handle. But death is the part you got to risk, But is any part of you ever where if you say you ever been skiing and then you fall and you're like, this could be it. Let's see what happens here.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I have so many irons in the fire in my life. I've got a full-time medical practice. I love doing research and sharing about near-death experiences. I've got so much going on. I'm very careful not to get into a life-threatening event. I mean,
Yeah, you stay out of
one,
them.
you know, I mean, I get what you're coming from. Sure, at one level, it'd be, I think, an adjunct to my research to say this is what I experienced and here's what happened. But don't you think that might
seem
lead
fake
to
now.
you get a little confirmation bias?
I agree.
And then I'd start to see other near-death experiences through the filter of my own
Yeah,
experience.
dude, I can't believe earlier I was like, we have don't you think there's a lot of confirmation bias? And then I just try to talk you into confirmation bias.
Oh, well,